If I were on the space station and had a Spider-Man thing, I would be all over the walls because that would be hilarious. So we shall kick off, as always, with follow-up. Last time, Ryan, you were talking about Iron Ore 6 and Apollo and discussing the differences between their designs and how it relates to their spinner-proofness, if you will, how well they deal against, do you think they would deal with horizontal spinners? I was, what was I? Not entirely convinced by your arguments last time, and it seems that the Reddit was also not entirely convinced. I wonder if you had any further thoughts on this.
My further thought is that I'm not entirely convinced either. It's a tricky one because in my head I had a very slightly different mental image of what Iron Ore 6 looks like to the real version. So the version I was seeing in my head was the perfect anti-spinner design and was going to take the world by storm.
Of course.
So defensively, I think I was pretty wrong on that. I still kind of stand by what I said in terms of it being an easier flipper to use against a horizontal spinner because you've got that much bigger sort of attack surface, that attack area, and it's going to be... Well, basically, it's going to mean that the opponent is above your flipper arm for longer. And it is, or must be, I say is as though I've got experience of this, it must be incredibly difficult to time a flip in those situations when you know that the moment that weapon makes contact, the two of you are going to be flying apart. You're then in a situation where milliseconds are going to matter. So if your bar being, bar panel in this case, being 3 times wider, gives you that extra tiny fraction of a second to make contact that's going to help you, that could be the difference. It isn't as big an advantage as I was probably making it sound like I thought it was. And I'm happy to say that it's not a huge thing, but it just looks better to me. What I will definitely say is that Iron Ore 6, this series, was not a better flipper than Apollo. And I doubt it will be in the next episode either.
It might, come out in Storm and just destroy everything, but yeah, it's unlikely.
Wedge to victory.
Yeah, I can see that it might be easier to get a flip against a horizontal with a wider flipping arm, but yeah, I don't think there's enough difference between the two designs to have any significant impact on the on its how would Jonathan Pierce describe it? Defensibility, maybe, for two spinners.
Defendability factor. I think the way I kind of thought of that when I was having that conversation was, which one would I have more confidence driving? And I think I'd feel more confident trying to attack with Iron Ore. And I don't think it's necessarily any easier, but if you feel like it's easier, I think that does affect your performance.
Yeah, mind games.
So maybe there's a slight psychological edge to having that larger flipper. I'm clutching at straws here very hard. The straws are no longer straw shaped. They're not taking liquid anymore. They're completely flat. That's how hard I'm clutching them right now.
Oh dear.
I think a far more interesting piece of follow-up comes from episode 11.
Okay.
And we didn't really touch on this because we had a bit of a gap between 11 and 12. 11 was our preview for this series, and by the time episode 12 came round, obviously we had a series to look at. And I don't think we really spoke about your little open letter to Ellis Ware, did we?
Not after I'd given it, no.
Can you remind us what you were asking for?
I said, in far more words than this, but what I said was, if Ellis burns out so much as a single motor, or a single component even, on his robot Magnetar in this series, I would expect an apology and an explanation in the Reddit.
And Ellis's very simple response was, no apologies.
Was no apologies is how he replied to that.
We spent far more time than we should have trying to work out what that might have meant. Was it, there's nothing to apologise for, or was it, I don't care what you think? Right now, I'm thinking it's probably both.
I would imagine both, yeah. I doubt the guy cares what we think, but it was funny that, yeah, obviously this heat, there were no burnouts. Now, there's still more to come from Magnetar, so there's still time. He can still burn something out and displease me, but we're not there just yet.
I think this is an episode where Magnetar was not tested, really.
No, not significantly.
But we'll get to all of that. For now, all I can say is I was definitely backing Magnetar purely so it would go against you.
I
Isn't
did
because it's a beautiful machine, isn't because it's a design I love, just because of you.
just to try and get to me. I did tweet Ellis and say, so proud.
Yes. Hey, Ellis, keep it up. Proud of you.
You've made one of the hosts of Spinnerproof, a show that everyone listens to, really proud.
What hasn't made you proud is this episode, is it? Has it? Does it? Words.
So, this entire series, I think we both have, but me definitely have complained about the format kind of thing for this series of Robot Wars. What's going on with, the shape that each show takes and stuff, and I think this is sort of, there's so much fluff in these episodes in a way that wasn't there before, if that makes sense. So like in earlier series, we had like the judges thing, like conversations with a judge every episode pretty much. And that was fluff and we complained about it and we simply rather they did different things. But like in hindsight, having now seen the alternative of no judges segment, they fill the time with lots of these sort of those interviewee segments, where you've got the captain, the team captain against a black background and a camera. It's just them sort of saying things clearly from an interview, but without the interviewer in there. It's a common thing in television. Don't know why I'm explaining it to you, but I am. So there's a lot more of that kind of stuff, and there's a lot more repetition of information we've just seen. It feels like I'm watching a show that's designed to have adverts put in it or something, where there's lots of, earlier in this episode, you saw this happen. It's like, I don't need to see the replay of that fight. I watched it a mere 10 minutes ago. I know what happened. I was there. So it's just sort of, I just feel there's a lot more of that, which means that all that padding is just much more obvious to me than with the judges segment, because it's not adding anything at all. It's just repeats of information we already know. Yeah.
I think the difficulty they've had with this episode and a couple of others is that there's been a lot of short fights.
Yeah.
And when you're losing, 5 or 6 minutes of your 1 hour programme, that is a very difficult thing to do anything meaningful with. And I don't miss the judges segments as they were, because I think we've only really had one good judges section that added anything. If it was a choice between no judges sections and good judges sections, I'd take them. But if it's a choice between this fluffy repetition and a bad judges section, I'm almost going to take the fluff. I think there's better fluff they could create, but I'd almost rather take it.
I think I'd rather have the rubbish judges thing, actually, just because then you sort of know it's happening. I feel like a lot of the time, so I watch this with Hannah, and Hannah, while she enjoys Robot Wars, she might often be off somewhere else doing something else, like in the room, and then she'll come over when the fight begins. So like when this fluff goes, she'll go off and do something else for a bit. And it's really hard to tell when is the interesting bit, the fight, actually going to happen again. There's a couple of times where I've sort of like called out, a fight's beginning, and then she comes and sits down, and it's another 5 minutes of just sort of repeating earlier fights before it actually happens. It's really hard to tell when stuff's moving on. And I think at least with the judges segment, it was sort of, because they'd filled up that time in one place, they didn't have this fluff everywhere else. So it was like, if you knew you didn't care about the judges segment, you could just tune out for 5 minutes and then come back and the fight would be there. I think it's a hard one for me to get put into words and get across, but I do feel that this feels like half an hour of content spread over an hour, and it's quite, I don't know, I wish it wasn't. I'd rather it was a half-hour show at this point,
So what you're saying is that you want a judges segment because it's a 5-minute tea break.
It's, I don't know. I think it's better if you're gonna have padding, put all the padding in the same place. I don't know. I don't. Like I said, it's really hard to articulate. But yeah, like that is a good tea break. It's a natural pause. Maybe it's just a sign that I have no attention span anymore. There's that.
I was gonna say because of course in this conversation I am trying to get the BBC to build my perfect version of Robot Wars. I'm not someone who's going to zone out for a couple of minutes. I'm there for the hour. I don't watch much TV. This is basically the only TV I watch. I'm willing to give it my attention. So that's not necessarily my concern with it. The reason I don't like the fluff we currently have is that it's the kind of fluff that lets them do things I don't like in terms of crafting stories and all of that I have gone on about far too many times now to even be interested in repeating. What I'd like to see is for that fluff to be looking at people making repairs, getting details about the repairs they're making.
Yeah.
That, I think, is A, more interesting, and B, far more informative than the judges' segments we've had.
Yeah, I would be completely okay if they did more. When we saw everyone getting involved repairing, was it Androne or something, or one of
Bucky, you're thinking of,
or Bucky, when everyone was getting
it was
involved.
Androne, wasn't it? It was one of the Bucky team that was helping. I'm dim.
So it was like, everyone getting involved with helping that out and that kind of stuff, or the antics that we've not really seen between teams and in behind the scenes and stuff. Like, I don't know, I'd happily see more of the behind the scenes in the pits action. That would be fine. It's I guess it's the repeating of fights that we've just watched, and the constant interview segments and stuff. It's just I don't know. It's just not as interesting.
The other thing I found weird is just how different the format has been between different episodes. And of course, that is largely reliant on how much time do we need to fill. But stuff like this episode, we've had most of the interviews happening as they're walking back into the pits, whereas in other episodes, we've had loads of stuff presented live from in the arena. And things like it's just feeling a bit disjointed. It almost feels like different people have edited every episode. And they've all got a different idea of what it's supposed to look like.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case, to be honest. Because, like, big structural things have changed between episodes as well. So, like, remember in the first few episodes, we were talking about how there's no intro sequence at all. It was just straight in, shot of Nuts 2 in a field, and then straight into fights. There wasn't sort of like there wasn't that title sequence and stuff like that in there. And then they've sort of slowly brought that back. And I don't know if if they had all of this stuff, I presume they did, but all edited and finalised long before it was all aired, or if they're still sort of editing them just in time for being aired and they're making tweaks as they go. I don't know. But yeah, I know what you mean. It does feel a bit disjointed. I can...
You know what? I hadn't thought about this until now, but that shot of Nuts is the original Nuts. That's not Nuts 2. That's the old, really wide one with the big sort of pods coming out the sides of the wheels to help itself right. Almost every Team VT we've had, any images of the robot have been old versions. This is starting to feel like a slightly low-effort series of Robot Wars.
Yeah, maybe.
They haven't gone out and done the work. They've got a load of team captains in for an interview.
Yeah, there's no VTs of, like, them at home anymore either, is there? Or is that...
Yeah, and what there is, it's using footage from the VTs last time round. So, for example, Tauron was the old version of the Tauron, not even the same machine. I'm not sure they barely share any parts. The footage of Eruption was of the old beaten-up Eruption and not the new one. It's all... Yeah, I'm a bit worried now that I've noticed that. I wish I hadn't realised.
Oh, dear. Yeah. That is an interesting point. It does, yeah, an interesting point. I don't know what to make of it, though.
No, and of course, we also don't want this to turn into a podcast about TV production, although we're kind of already there. This is what happens when you have two people that have done a bit of making videos talking about a TV series. That B in media studies is still there,
I didn't even do media studies, man. It's just you.
Hey, it's a very serious and important course.
I do, analysis of media for fun.
The life you lead, man. The life you lead.
Recreational criticism.
I must say, on our shared notes that we go through to do this whole podcast, when I saw you saying about the format, I thought you meant the competition format. Because I think this episode is a failing of the competition format in terms of entertainment value. It helps us get the correct outcome. We get the two best robots in the final. But I think for entertainment value, it's not helped. Because what it's done is taken the two best robots, and bear in mind, there's only 3 out of 6 robots here that even work fully. It's taken them out of the action for a round. So the two robots we want to see most of, we've seen least of.
I think what you want, Ryan? What is the phrase? To have your cake and eat it too, or something equally silly?
Yeah.
I know. I see, as if that's an unreasonable thing. By the way, having cake and then eating it, that makes sense. Anyway, yeah, I see what you mean. I think it is less entertaining when you've got this sort of divide in here's some good robots and here's some maybe not less good, but like less functional robots. I think we can say. It's sort of it does make that a bit more tedious. I think you get a few more bashy fights than we did before, possibly. But then, what we've gained is we haven't seen robots go out that shouldn't have done immediately.
Yes, and what we also haven't seen is fights between crippled robots, and that is the thing that this format has really got rid of. I will say, overall, I think this format is an absolute success. This is one of those things that was always going to be a danger, and you can kind of accept it happening for one of the 5 heats. Although they could have avoided it with the robots they selected for each heat. I think if a bit more thought went into who faces who in a heat, and, maybe something like a seeding system, which I know is a completely ludicrous thing to ask for, that would have avoided this as well. So it's not entirely the fault of the format.
How dare you request a seeding system? That's unheard of in the sport. Never happens.
It would just complicate things and no one would like it. It would be terrible.
No one would understand it. It would be a mess, Ryan. I mean, how could you even suggest it?
I mean, a mini league system is just so much easier for people to follow. You know what I want? And this is really niche. I'm not even sure you'll have come across it, even though it's a thing that I know from playing Ultimate Frisbee. I want Robot Wars to operate as a Swiss draw.
A Swiss draw? I don't know this. I'm sorry. I've let you down.
It's basically a competition format where you seed teams, and then teams can play anyone. But if you're, say, 26th seed and they're 4th seed, them beating you doesn't give them many points, but you beating them gives you loads of points. So basically, if something like Traction managed to take out Carbide, they'd basically go straight to the top of the table.
I don't think, I know you're kind of joking, but just to take it a bit too seriously, I don't know that would work, because you do get times where a robot that should be seeded higher than a low-seeded robot doesn't win against the low-seeded robot. And it's not because the lower-seeded robot beat it, it's just because there was a reliability problem or some other circumstance that meant that they won, either on the judges' thing or maybe the better robot got beached on something and was counted out. And it's like, does that really, warrant the other team getting more points than they would otherwise have got? I don't know.
You know what you've just done there? You've brought us beautifully onto the topic of our first robot in this heat. Expulsion, the robot that's made it into the grand final without actually driving out of the arena at any point. It hasn't finished a single one of its fights mobile.
No, it hasn't.
How has this happened?
It's just the way it went, I suppose. Yeah.
I mean, I was really excited for Expulsion.
Yeah, so was I. I was really looking forward to it.
I stand by my reasons for being excited. I think the fact it didn't work doesn't mean that it wasn't a good idea to try, if that makes sense. It was an interesting and innovative idea. I think it does have merits. I think the execution was a long way below the idea, which, given the limitations of being a school team, I think was kind of to be expected.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree that it's an interesting idea. I'd love to see the sort of like self-writing-y bit of it work. I'd love to see what that looks like in action.
There is video of it working.
Yeah, I feel like I have sort of like, I may have like side-eyed some video of it in like a live event or something, but not watched it too closely for fear of spoiling myself too much. So I might go back and see if I can and hunt that down and watch it. So it is interesting. I think the compromises they've made to the weapon to get to that design are a bit much for me. I don't really see how that weapon can be particularly damaging or effective, and I don't know if that's just because it's really light or if that's just because it's at completely the wrong angle. I'm not sure. I
mean, to say that it's light is a bit misleading because they've got quite a wide selection of different, I don't know what to call them, blades, bars, discs. None of those really make sense, but attachments essentially. And one of those does seem to be pretty weighty. The issue they've got is that the motor that's on it seems to be quite badly underpowered, to the point where if they're upside down and resting on the weapon, the motor doesn't have the power to spin the body.
So unfortunate. Yeah, maybe if it was just a more powerful motor, that would make it work. But I mean, the angle of the weapon, I just think I just feel like they struggle to get hits with it against robots, especially if they're coming like, if you imagine, because you've got like the bottom of that, it's almost, I think anyway, from what I sort of saw, I think that bar is, or their weapon is not at 45 degrees. I think it's almost vertical in some situations. And then you've got like the bite point of that thing quite close to the floor. So unless you're coming onto the front of even if you come into the front of a wedge, I don't see how you hit anything on the front. So it almost feels like you would almost want, the world's greatest wheel design, so that you could come in sideways. Or so, I don't know. It's just the way that weapon, the geometry of everything involved, just feels like it struggles to get hits against robots, and even against like an immobile robot, like when it fought Push to Exit. It's it never seemed to get particularly good bites on the other robot, if that makes sense.
I think what you've got there is a weapon design that is going to be very good at landing a hit that the judges count as a hit on just about any robot. What it's going to struggle with is landing a hit that does damage on most robots. So that is one of the very sort of rare beasts that could hit Crackers and Smash and hit Gabriel. It can hit something really low, it can hit something really tall. Whether it's going to do damage to either is the bigger question. And with that lighter one on especially, the answer is seemingly quite categorically no. I think our foam core robot idea could almost do okay against it defensively.
Oh dear.
The real issue they've had as well is driving it. Because of course, again, it isn't something that you can necessarily go out and practice with, and it is a bit of an unusual design. I doubt it drives like any other robot. And they've had quite a sort of extended love affair with the arena walls at the end of the day, because that's where they've ended up driving.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know if they were like sharing the controller around at any point, because like I feel like some fights were better than others, but maybe the earlier fights were just so short it didn't matter. But yeah, there was definitely that one fight toward the end where they just kept driving it into a wall, which is a shame. Like yeah, it just must be a hard robot to control.
I think the more interesting element of the driving was the minibot driving. When, as soon as the melee started, it just drove straight onto the flame pit and beached itself. It was like a sharp left turn, perfectly onto the flame pit, and that was it.
Yeah.
That was minibot out of action.
Yeah. I mean, we complain about bad driving, but I struggle to think that I would do any better. I feel like robot driving is one of those things that when people do it well, it looks really easy. You think, oh yeah, I can do that.
Oh, absolutely.
And
yeah.
I've played a lot of computer games, so I think, oh yeah, I'll be really good at that. It'll be absolutely fine. But I fully believe that it is a lot harder than it looks.
But the whole point of this is that we're armchair engineers, armchair drivers, armchair everything. We get to sit here on our high horse and assume it's all simple.
To do some armchair driving of other people's robots.
Oh dear.
What did you think of the Sabretooth school of robot design that Expulsioners seem to go with, of never having a robot that looks the same as the previous one? Do you reckon they're going to keep going with that?
Dara made this point, and I'm very glad to hear it, of this robot should not be called Expulsion. If they called it Expulsion 2, that's a pass. That's fine. Big green tick, 10 out of 10, whatever. This is not the same robot. You cannot keep the same name. We had this with Bite Force as well in BattleBots. It's entirely different. Nuts has gone to Nuts 2, and it's basically the same robot visually. Gabriel has been called Gabriel 2 when it's the same robot visually, and yet this can still be Expulsion.
But what about, like, because I said the Sabretooth school of design because they do the same thing. They have a different design of robot every time, and it's always just called Sabretooth.
Yeah, but I'd like them, so that's okay. Sorry, that makes it sound like I don't like Expulsion. That's not what I meant.
Oh dear. So inconsistent, Ryan. You're so inconsistent.
Consistency is boring. It can't be predictable.
Well, I don't have particularly strong feelings one way or the other, I don't think. Well, not about expulsion, I'm sure. As I say this, I recall that I may have had a strong feeling about naming robots the same and them looking different before, but in this case, not bothered.
Talking of misnamed robots, Thor. Is it a hammer or is it an axe?
It's an axe bot. So
Then it should not be called Thor.
Well, I mean,
Thor did not have an axe. Normally it was a hammer, not an axe.
God of axes.
I should point out, I personally class what they have as a hammer, so for me it's a pass. The old version of Thor definitely had a hammer. That thing was huge. But if you're going to call it an axe, and Jason calls it an axe, then change the name.
What would you call it?
Black and red axie robot. I don't know. It isn't my job to name them. It's my job to reject names.
I don't know. I think Thor is a good name. I'm fine with it being called Thor. I think the weapon he was using most of the time in this episode looked like a hammer to me more than anything. Maybe I don't know how narrow. I don't know how sort of like forced into boxes they want the robots to go with in terms of that one word description of what they are. Like we laugh about that crazy intro, like the spinner and the axe bot stuff. It's like, what, you know, if they've got something that uses a hammer, it's like, well, do we call that a hammer bot, right? Or do you just call it an axe bot like everything else? A hammer, you want a hammer bot? Hammer bot,
right? If you go into the woods to chop down a tree and I send you with a hammer, you're not going to be happy. If you're doing some DIY at home and you need to bang in a nail and I give you an axe, you're not going to be happy. They're different things.
See, I think that second example less good, because an axe you can turn around and it's got a flat bit on the other side.
I knew you were going to say that, so let's say it's a pickaxe. What are you going to do? Use it sideways?
Yeah, just use it sideways.
You might as well just slam your fist into the nail at this point.
Well, no, because my fist is not made of metal.
I don't know, stamp on it then.
My feet and shoes still not made of metal.
Wear a suit of armour, I don't care. My point stands, they're different things. The good news is, this Thor is not the same thing as last time.
No, thank God.
It is a very, very different beast. And I'm a big fan of it. I mean, I was always a fan of Thor, but this version is back to its best.
Yeah, I think visually this is quite similar to last year's version. I feel like it's, I described it here as last year's design done right. I think there's a lot of visual similarity, and I think he's worked out all the or most of the kinks with it anyway, if not all of them. So yeah, it was really good to see Thor back on form.
I mean, his pneumatic system still doesn't like big impacts.
Nope.
But I'm not sure that many pneumatic systems do.
What gave you that idea?
What I really love, and I'm sure he's got other versions of it because he did last time, I really love the scoop he was using this episode. I think the job of a scoop on a hammerbot, almost said axe there, that would have been really annoying. The job of a scoop on that is to trap the opponent on there. And the sort of dustpan he's got is going to do that job very well. Not sure it's the right option to go up against Magnetar with, because it's got those kind of teeth on the front instead of being a solid, flat thing. So I think that helped Ellis get under him a bit. But for the other fights, it was absolutely perfect. If he's up against the horizontal, I'm guessing he's got a kind of ploughy scoop again as well. And of course, the drive looks a lot better as well. It seemed like last time he was struggling with the different drive layout to the original. Well, I say original, the reboot original. Whereas I'm guessing that he's had more time to drive this one, has got used to it, and boy, is he driving it well.
It was driven so well. There's a couple of things about Thor's drive that I find fascinating. One is it's so fast, it's a bit ridiculous. But the thing that I think I mentioned that there's another robot that does this as well. That when it turns, sometimes it's like doesn't look like it's moving very fast, and you feel like it should turn on the spot, but it kind of just. Its back wheel just somehow kind of drift, and it turns around a point that's further forwards than where I think those wheels are, and I don't understand how. And
I think it was Supernova you were thinking of.
Supernova
last time,
did that
it?
as well, yeah. Supernova, does that as well. And it's sort of like it's just so weird to see because it just kind of just floats sideways sometimes when it's turning, and sometimes it's because he's going at speed and he's drifting, and that's fine. But sometimes. He's almost stationary and it still does it, and it's really bizarre.
With Supernova, that made a lot of sense to me because when you've got a big spinning disc up front, that really affects your weight distribution. So it made sense there might be a slightly sort of weird centre of mass that it was turning around. With Thor, I don't know. I hadn't noticed that, I'll be honest, but yeah, I can't explain that, which, considering I'm a genius when it comes to all things physics, is very surprising.
I mean, the movement isn't as pronounced as it was, but it is on Supernova, but it is still there occasionally. It's just a bit. It's just weird. I love it though. I think it's fascinating to see.
The one difficulty I think the drive still presents is that it does like to wheelie a little bit.
Yeah, I did notice that. He does wheelie a few times.
I don't think it really costs him at any point, but if he was up against a flipper or up against another vertical, I think that could be problematic.
Yeah, it's just sort of, it opens a very small window for someone else to come and sort of do a game-changing move. And it's, it's a small window, but it's a window that's there, and it would be nice if it wasn't there.
It's a window you'd shut if you could, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But I suppose it is very much, what's the word I'm looking for? I was going to say a sacrifice you make, but not quite. It's part and parcel of having such powerful drive. And as much as he could maybe put a little sort of wheelie bar on the back to stop it happening, there are a lot of advantages to having a bit of ground clearance at the back and being able to drive back off of things, back off of the pit if it's being silly. There was a point during one fight where he kind of got leaned up against the wall but could drive straight back off because he had that at the back. So I imagine it's not something that was a surprise to him. I imagine he's accepting that for a reason. So that is Thor.
Yeah, I don't want to introduce the next robot because, like Jonathan Pierce, I cannot say this word. So please, please save me the pain.
Coyote. It's easy. We went through this last time. No, Coyote. First of all, let's just show some appreciation for Angela really doubling down on the whole Coyote call thing and trying to make it work again.
She really went for it.
I mean, sometimes as a presenter, I imagine you have to take some risks for the benefit of entertainment. You probably quite quickly get used to potentially making a fool of yourself. And she sailed through that as an utter professional. It's a fair play. Coyote, I believe, was a reserve for this series.
That would explain a lot of my thoughts on this robot.
Really? Okay, you go ahead then. You go ahead.
What changed with this robot from last time? It looks like to me all I sort of saw was that it's got copper pipes around the wheels, and that was sort of it.
Internally, I'm not sure that much has changed, but the state it came out in after that carbide fight, you have to assume it's been pretty much rebuilt from the ground up.
Yes, obviously it's not the same robot, but like
they haven't just like bent a couple of bits back into shape.
Do you know what I mean though? Because it doesn't look. There's nothing about it that screams, "Oh, we've spent a year working on this and now we've brought it back and we've been accepted straight away." And the fact that you mentioned that it was a reserve, sort of thing. Well, maybe they sort of just entered on a whim with the same robot, and then that's why it's not been sort of like revved in the same way that all these other robots seem to have been. They all seem to have had other stuff done on them. There's stuff we can point out that's different from the last time we saw it, which I don't. Nothing. I mean, I'm sure there are differences between this Coyote and the last one, but it doesn't stand out quite as much.
One quick point of order: not a year between series, not even close. Maybe a few months, but
I know.
This is the kind of thing that I would want to see get accepted more. That's the thing, because what they've done is gone away, kept the same design, and made it a bit better. And I think we would have better episodes of Robot Wars in general if teams didn't feel the need to go away and make massive risky upgrades that quite often end up not working. So imagine if PP3D hadn't had to go away and to make sure they were accepted for the next series, up the power of a disc that was already proving to be too powerful. Imagine if they'd been able to go away, confident of making the next series, make what they had actually work, and come back reliable. That would have made for better Robot Wars. Now, Coyote isn't a robot that needed to go away and do that, really. It's quite a bad example of it. Hobgoblin coming up is probably a better example of a robot that would benefit from that, let's say. Notice the tentative language of that statement. But yeah, I really like that they've been able to come back, as just a slightly better version of what went before.
I mean, I'm not entirely consoled on it being better than it was before. I feel like the weapon never really worked at all.
Well, that's because it just happened to come up against the same hammer twice that snapped it off both times. I would argue there are 2 fights where the weapon has been entirely effective. They've grabbed Expulsion, pushed her over to the wall and put them out. They've grabbed hold of Hobgoblin a few times, shoved them into the house robots. They've grabbed hold of Dead Metal at one point as well. The weapon has absolutely done what it was meant to. And this episode really needed another reliable robot, and Coyote gave us that.
Yeah, I suppose it sort of did, sort of didn't. I guess the fact that it kept losing to Thor was it sticks in my mind, I suppose.
Yeah, and that was an unfortunate matchup to come up again, really. Again, just a quirk of the format.
Yeah, not ideal, really.
Talking of being almost the same as last series, another thing that was almost the same is that the chainsaw didn't last very long.
Of course not, and it never will.
It's a really nice aesthetic touch to go out into a melee with. I doubt they're expecting it to come back.
I think I said last time we talked about this robot that I do like the chainsaw tail on it, and I still do. I do think it's funny, and as ever, I like robots that have 2 weapons.
I mean, in this case, neither weapon is reliable on being heavy, so I can allow them the 2 weapons. It isn't like you'd be going, if they put 5 more kilos into that chainsaw, it'd be a game changer.
No, yeah, I mean, yeah, I think, yeah, kinetic energy weapons accepted. Multiple weapons always makes me smile a bit. But yeah, there are times when it's not an appropriate thing to do.
But no, the whole thing with Coyote, it's a simple idea, done pretty well, and I would happily see it next series and the series after and the series after.
And
I don't expect you to agree.
Oh no, I'd be fine if it kept coming back. That would, I'd be okay with it. I don't think I'm ever going to love it, but well, I don't know. I'd be fine if it kept coming back.
So I suppose the big question then is, did you enjoy this melee?
Yeah, for the most part, it was all right. I think it was a bit of a shame that Expulsion got pushed into the wall immediately, and then that was it. And then it was a bit of a bashy between Coyote and Thor, but I enjoyed. I mean, I guess I enjoyed it as much for laughing at Jonathan Pierce as much as anything else.
That's what Jonathan Pierce is there for.
There were also potential shenanigans with the Dial of Doom in this.
Tell me more.
So Thor hits the button and releases Dead Metal. It's fine. I'm okay with that. Thor hits the button. Quite obvious. It's all good there. And then a little later on, Coyote pushes Thor into the Dial of Doom, and that counts.
Ooh.
Ooh.
So I suppose that is affirmative action on the part of Coyote, making it count as their press. This is a question that we've kind of asked before, so this... I mean, it's not an answer. We know this won't be applied consistently. It's the last thing we expect, but it's another data point, It's always good to have.
Because the other time we've seen it, I think, is when Killer Lot pushed a robot, possibly even like Crackers, and smashed into it or something. And
it was one of the kegs, with the kegs having already pressed.
Yeah.
And that was stressful for everyone involved. And I still have nightmares.
Keep you up at night, does it?
Every night. Cold sweat I wake up in. Thinking, was it the one with yellow wheels or was it the one with red?
So images, like in films and stuff, you've got the main or a character having a nightmare, and they sort of like, it's a big sort of sit up and inhale in one go, like as they wake up, with eyes wide open. I've got images of you doing that.
Flashbacks every time I go to a pub. I was going to ask a really sensible question about this fight as well, and I've completely lost that now. So thank you for that.
You're most welcome. I mean, this is the fight where Coyote and Thor team up against Dead Metal for a short while.
Oh yes, lovely moment. Always good to see the house robots get it back a little bit. Not sure they'd have messed with Matilda in the same way, but
yeah, no, it was funny. I always like seeing competitors take on the house robots, and it's especially pleasing when they team up to do it, I think.
I think this is one of the nice things that comes from having them all in the same booth as well. There is going to be that sort of mutual thing of let's have fun for a second and then get back to it.
Can you just imagine, like, at one point, if just all three teams in a melee. Like, so you've got a heat that's got a really good lineup, lots of really strong robots, and they all decide, screw this, let's spend the first few moments and just go and attack the house robots.
I think you're someone that would like to go on YouTube and Google Robot Wars Flipper Frenzy.
Is that so?
Which was a constructed event, possibly for a series of Extreme, where they got all the best flippers in the arena at once, and they all just went after the house robots instead of each other.
Flipper Frenzy. Should we do some live commentary? Or shall I do some live commentary?
Not again.
Not again.
This is never good when we do it. We just fall into it.
Okay, I won't do it then. I'll move on.
I can throw it in some show notes.
Yeah. Put the link in the show notes.
To this.
Put the link in the show notes.
Overall, that fight, it isn't something that's ever going to make a highlight reel of the best fights, but it was a really good fight. It was a proper old school, two robots going at each other for the full 3 minutes. It wasn't a 10-second KO like we keep seeing. It wasn't one robot getting beaten on but limping its way through to nearly the end. It was an actual contest. And we should always be grateful to get that. It isn't the big sort of put it in the trailer, sparks flying everywhere kind of fight. But that, to me, is proper robot combat almost.
What we have here is a novel of a robot fight rather than a tweet of a robot fight.
I don't know. At 280 characters now, that's still basically
that's
a tweet,
yeah.
you know.
An old school tweet of a...
Back in my day.
Back when Twitter was good.
140 characters. Didn't use a flag emoji, it counted as 2.
That's true. Oh, yeah.
Right, let's move on to the second melee.
Yes, let's.
And let's start with Magnetar, because that's the order it happened in.
Hello, Magnetar. How are you?
Well, I mean, we've gone from Pulsar, which was basically a extremely expensive doorstop, to this.
Yeah. Before we just, I want to touch on one thing that was mentioned by Ellis in his VT, and I feel a bit bad doing it, but I'm going to do it anyway. One of the things, and it was using the trailers as well, was I don't like being called a boy genius. and then everyone in the whole episode proceeds to call him a boy genius for the whole thing, which I think was a bit cruel.
Dara even does it while basically right next to him to camera. I should point out that I have the words boy genius in big capitals on my notes, just to amuse myself, really.
And I think it's unfair to call him a boy genius because he's a man genius, surely.
See, here's the thing. If you start young, does that mean you're always going to have to be a boy or girl genius?
I don't know. But it did make me laugh. I wonder what the order of events there was. Did they record these interviewee things after they'd done it and he'd heard Dara describe him as a boy genius and then said in the interview, I don't like being called a boy genius? Or was it that Dara saw that interview and thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to call him a boy genius. That'll be funny.
I'd like to think number 2, if either. That whole VT is quite interesting because, of course, this is one of the ones where they've actually had to get new footage of the robot because it's so beautiful.
Yeah.
If you didn't, there would be a flood of complaints.
It's sufficiently different, yeah.
Before Magnetar, no one was going to complain about having to look at Pulsar. But now, if you deny me even 5 seconds of this robot, I'm going to be angry.
It does look spectacular, Magnetar. I really do think so. I love the colour scheme as well. I think it's an unusual colour scheme, and I love it.
I don't know what to describe that colour as. It's almost kind of rose gold. We see a lot of teams that put effort into the aesthetics. And for Ellis, it seems to be almost effortless. It's like he just thought of it and it already looked good.
This is one of those things where I think the beauty of it follows the function that it serves. You know, that you've got robots like Warhead that are designed as an art piece more than anything else, and they're spectacular in their own way. But then it's an art piece because of what it does as well. It just, you know, that beauty follows from the design of robot that he's got, and I like it. It's kind of, it's not over the top. I don't think it's still very necessary, everything about it, but it does look amazing. I guess I think the word I'm looking for is it's very refined.
It is, yeah, that's absolutely what it is. every tiny little angle on it seems to be just about perfect. So here's a question. Is Carbide ugly?
It's middle of the road, I think.
I'm starting to find Carbide a bit ugly. Especially Series 7... Sorry. No. Especially Series 8 Carbide. Where it had that weird, almost sort of disco ball pattern on the inside of where the bar is. That was awful.
Yeah, that was fun. That was weird, wasn't it?
Terrible.
Yeah.
And at the time, it didn't occur to me that that's ugly, but it definitely is. I think the whole black and green thing, it's a bit old school now. We've got to go down the Ellis route. It's the only way.
Rose gold, all the things. Maybe they should start doing space grey as well, and then every time they bring it back, do a slightly different shade of grey. There's an irritant for anyone who buys iPhones.
Well, it's your own fault if you're buying an iPhone. You deserve to be unhappy.
It is their own fault or our own fault. I'm not sure people who buy iPhones deserve to be unhappy though.
I was gonna say what I just said was a very sort of 2004 comment. Bloody early adopters being happy with their purchases. How dare they? So from the sleek, refined Magnetar, we move on to purple and green hobgoblin.
The egg beater, yes. This, just for the record, this is not a beautiful robot. I'm sorry to say.
There's something about it that I do like, design-wise. And I don't know what it is.
I don't know what it is
There's
either.
a word for like an art style that I cannot think of right now because I don't know art.
Is it like brutalist? Is that what you're thinking of?
Yes. Yes, I never expected you to know an art word.
Well, you get like brutalist architecture, which is fascinating.
Yeah, I suppose it is more of an architectural term, actually. That's absolutely correct. But it is kind of a brutalist robot. It's that sort of thing where you can really see the big, thick aluminium bulkheads. You can see the big, thick layers of HDPE. And I do quite like that.
Yeah, I don't like brutalism in architecture, and I don't like it in robot design either, I'm afraid. I mean, it's fine. It's fine. It's not the ugliest robot in the world, but it's, I think it's just, middle of the road to ugly, but nothing too bad. For me, anyway.
I think if there'd been more of a visible effort to make it look good, it would look bad. But because it's just kind of, throw some colours on it, it kind of works for me.
Yeah, this is another sort of like design that follows the function of it almost. It's sort of they've not. I don't think anyway. They've gone for something that's intended to be aesthetically pleasing, and I think unlike the refinedness of Magnetar, it's not quite the same here. But it's fine. It's fine. I think I'd like it more if it had done more to impress me in its fights.
So much potential in that weapon. Now, Harry, the guy that made it, has put out an absolutely fantastic build diary, which kind of goes through the whole build process. But the main thing it shows is someone making 90% of a great robot and stopping. There's a lot of really good thought and really good engineering that's gone into the design. And then it seems like those final bits just haven't quite happened. So the wheels on top are kind of a bit of an afterthought. A useful afterthought, but still a bit of an afterthought. And he's had to do quite a lot of work to sort of make components fit and things like that, because he's sort of gone through an upgrade process and had to use the space he had. And I think the drive issue was due to panels rubbing on the wheels and things like that, stuff that... It's like when you write an essay and you're really stressed about getting it finished, and then you get it finished like 6 hours before deadline. And when you get there, you kind of think, oh, great, I've got 6 hours to hone this and perfect it. And then you realise that you're just tired and you don't want to do it anymore. That's kind of what it looks like as a robot.
Yeah, it's a robot that's sort of almost, it's had like the first 90% of the work done, but not the second 90%, It's sort of, I think in order to refine it would take a lot of time. It's often the way of, you put all this time in, you think, I've done it now, but then, as with essay writing and with anything else, it's those final adjustments, that refinement takes a lot of time and effort as well.
Yeah, it's that point of diminishing returns, isn't it? It's so close to being brilliant. And this is a design that I want to see become more popular in heavyweights. And Hobgoblin could be the one to do it. Or should I say could have been. Because I do think now that after 2 series of coming in and not really working, if he applied again, I don't think it would get through, which is a shame.
I feel like the producers are probably as keen to see that weapon style work as anyone else. So maybe they'd get a third chance. I don't know, but
I'd love that to be true.
Yeah, I don't know. The producers are hard to predict, but yeah. Yeah, it is a bit disappointing. I've got one note against this robot, which is disappointment. I'm afraid. I wish it had been. I wish it had been more. I wish we'd have seen more of it. I feel like in all its fights, it kind of just stopped quite early in the fights, and we never really got to see it do anything, which was unfortunate.
We did get to see the power of the weapon to a certain extent.
What did it hit?
Well, it didn't hit anything, but Shunt's axe hit it.
This made me laugh because that felt very contrived. That felt like someone told the driver of Shunt to keep hitting the weapon until your axe broke, because that'll make good television.
I mean, it was an interesting driving choice to keep hitting the weapon.
Yeah. Like, it was just... I've never seen a house robot... Well, I don't often see house robots go, like, that hard against a robot for that long. Normally, they sort of, like, if a robot's in the corner of a corner patrol zone, they sort of... The house robots kind of hit it for a bit, and then maybe leave it, give it a bit of time to run away, or sometimes I almost feel like they kind of just, like, shove it a little bit to give it a bit of a chance to run away, but they just sort of, like, Shunt came in, kept them pinned against the wall and just kept firing the axe. And it was just, it was just kind of obvious that axe is going to get snapped because you keep hitting the weapon. So it did feel a bit contrived to me.
One of the things that we know from filming is that there's a lot of stuff after a robot is counted out that we don't get to see. So I wonder if this was just going to be another thing that happens after the count out that doesn't usually get aired, but because this happened, it's then got aired. I wonder if this is more common than the eventual TV broadcast makes it look.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe. You know what we should do, Ryan? We should get tickets to the next filming.
Mate, as soon as that happened, I was going to suggest it. So we need to peel back the curtain, We need to make our way to the inner sanctum. Or maybe we should just enter and see how hard it is.
We should get in touch with the producers, tell them that we host this really highly influential podcast, and they should give us VIP tickets. Exclusive access to
we'll just
everything.
make a really fancy-looking LinkedIn page. That's all you need in business, right? That's how 2017 works.
Don't be creepy, but I think I have a LinkedIn page that I updated once a long time ago, and still occasionally get emails from them about, and never look at because it's pointless.
I just get a large number of LinkedIn requests through my emails and ignore all of them.
Yep, that is... I think, to be honest, just everyone with an email address probably gets emails from LinkedIn and Facebook and just ignores them.
I just realised that there's a great segue on here talking about links and push to exit. Because that's how they went out last time. Removable link fell out.
Oh, dear.
If we're talking about robots that we wanted to see more from last time, there's no better place to move on to than push to exit. Yet another that is the only of its kind, weapon-wise, in the whole reboot, that has not necessarily been the best advert for its chosen weapon. It
flipped something once.
It flipped Hobgoblin in this fight.
It did, yeah.
And it really showed why a modern front hinge could be extremely effective. Because as soon as they flipped it, they know exactly where it's going to land. And if you can keep that weapon working and really throw a robot around, eventually you're going to be able to put them somewhere that they really don't want to be.
I feel like a front hinge flipper is probably actually better at flipping than any other type of flipper, isn't it? Because everything else kind of throws it, and there's no guarantee whether or not the robot that you've just flipped is going to come down on its back or its front, Whereas I think with this, it's much more likely to be and now you're upside down,
Yeah, it's good for overturning. What I would say is there's two sort of schools of front hinge. There's low pressure and full pressure. So low pressure is your kind of Cassius, Firestorm, push to exit kind of deal, where it's got a bit of a clout to it, but it's not trying to throw things up in the air. Then you've got something like Mute, which was a front hinge that was very high pressure that would flip itself as much as it was flipping anything else. And that was very much, chuck stuff in the air and see where it lands. So there's kind of both. They're both valid. I like this approach more. This is the kind of thing that has longevity on its side as well. It's going to keep coming at you. It's going to keep throwing you over. It's going to keep rolling you around. It's going to keep putting you into the walls or the house robots or anywhere you don't want to be. But to do that, it's got to keep moving, which was very much the issue here.
Yeah. So you're saying it's the removable link that fell out that stopped it from moving? Is that what did it?
No,
it stopped
last series that was.
What stopped it this time then, or was it just unreliable? Do we know?
I don't know.
Just
it was some kind of intermittent fault, wasn't it?
Yeah, there was. Yeah,
I would imagine probably something to do with the radio receiver. Maybe some kind of short or loose connection or something like that. That would explain an intermittent fault of that kind.
Yeah, it's a shame we didn't really see more of it. I don't have a lot more to say about this robot.
The other thing is, for a long time I've been struggling to describe the shape of this robot. And I've now realised that it's bone-shaped. Do you want to know the most interesting thing about this melee?
Of course.
For some reason, they're in the left-hand control box rather than the right.
How do you even notice this, man?
Because normally, when we get a camera angle of the drivers, we're seeing their left side. And in this, we were seeing all their right side. And the presenters were in the other box.
Are you sure it's just because the cameraman wasn't on the other side of them for some reason?
No, not at all. Because the cameras are just placed up static. On the sort of inside corner of the boxes, as it were. Go back and watch if you don't believe me.
Well, shall I do that now, or shall I?
I mean,
shall I wait?
if you want us to be sat here for a while, you could.
No, that's going to take me ages to find, so I won't. Well,
I mean, I'm right, so just get used to it.
I believe you. Trust but verify. So I shall verify later.
Let's face it, we know that if I'm wrong, it'll get mentioned, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. At this point, we don't have to do our own fact checking. That's fine.
Just outsource it.
Yeah. The joys of an audience. It's great. It's absolutely great. Of course, Push to Exit have opted for their traditional strategy of running into the opposite wall. Mm-hmm. But they've actually managed to survive doing that this time, which is nice.
Good for them.
What they haven't survived is any contact with a weapon.
Did they get like a little nick from Magnetar that took them out on this one, or did they just kind of stop? I forget which one they, because there's a few they just kind of stopped.
So they took an impact to the front right, which seems to almost lift half the shell up by the looks of it. There was sort of this big gaping gap between the bodywork and the ground on that corner afterwards, which seemed to be more than just a bit of it getting peeled upwards. And then they've ended up on the flipper, come down on top of Magnetar. And that's definitely the end of them.
Oh, yes. They were the first robot to land on Magnetar and then die.
Yes, a early victim of the floor flipper here.
Yeah. Yes, that's what happened in this one. Yeah, after which, I think, is it Shane? Is that the guy? Is that the person?
Shane Swan, yep.
Yeah, says, don't do me, Ellis, he says. While Ellis stares blankly into the distance, looking like he's about to do it.
Ellis isn't the kind of roboteer to go in for late hits on someone, though.
No, I didn't think he would, but it was quite funny. It's like, don't do me, Ellis, don't do it. And I was screaming at the television, do it, Ellis, do it.
What I really want to know is how Ellis drives with his hair over his face.
Oh, poor guy. As someone who's had his hair that long in the past, you can still see it's fine.
You still seem, you still maintain most of your field of vision.
Yeah, you just end up with
fine.
You just end up with a bit of a tick to keep swishing your head a little bit to get the fringe out of your eyes.
For context, Sam now has extremely short hair.
Yeah, Sam got fed up with the muscles on the left of his neck getting a bit too getting bulky from all the head movement, the little jerks.
When you eventually cut your hair, did you notice that one side of your neck was significantly more toned than the other?
Yeah, it was like, big, gym going left side of my neck and then some weedy, nerdy right side of my neck. That's how it worked. Left side was all tanned and stuff as well, whereas right side was pasty and white. That's how that works.
Oh, brilliant.
Jim Bro left, nerdy right.
This is a big. This whole conversation is a comment on the quality of this melee, isn't it? Really.
It was kind of just short, and then because two-thirds, basically, Ellis doesn't. He just kind of wins by default. The other two robots just kind of stop a little bit. It's a bit short. I guess Ellis does get the hit on push to exit, but yeah, short fight. I think
Ellis basically treats the rest of this fight as an opportunity to test the weapon at full chat.
Yeah, he spins it up when he probably doesn't need to.
Yeah, just cranks it up, sees if it's going to explode, and it doesn't.
No. And then he gyro dances for a bit.
Because you would if you could, wouldn't you?
I see. That's interesting because I think it's a risky thing to do, to gyro dance at the end of a fight, because obviously that must put a lot of strain on the weapon mounting, and I would think the last thing you'd want to do is blow up your weapon mounting, showing off at the end of a fight.
If your robot is in danger of killing itself by turning left or right, you haven't built a good enough robot.
This is true, but I imagine it's happened.
Yes, and those people would have deserved that. Ellis is not in that bracket of engineers.
You say that this is the man who burnt out motors twice in a row, so we can't assume that he's perfect.
Yeah, but he did so pushing boundaries. And boundaries push back, Sam. That's how this works.
Yeah, so maybe the boundaries of what his weapon can handle in terms of gyro dancing will push back and then blow up his weapon mounting.
Well, we'll see in the grand final, won't we? If there's a massive gyro dancing based weapon failure, I'll be sat here. I will give you a 5-minute formal apology if that happens. You can time it. I will stretch it out over that long.
If there's a gyro dancing weapon failure, I expect an apology from you and Ellis.
As we've already ascertained, no apologies. I feel like we can skip right over the Hobgoblin Coyote fight, can't we? The only interesting thing that happened was Shunt's axe flying off. Apart from that, it's just good control from Coyote, which, as a control bot, is something you'd expect.
So Killalot runs away at some point.
Oh, yeah, that is very interesting. Jonathan Pierce has done a bit of post hoc commentary-based rationalisation of a silly thing that's happened. So he sat there going, "Oh, Killalot can't come out of his CPZ because Hobgoblin isn't quite over that line."
When he was saying that, I was like, what are you on about, mate? Killalot always comes out. If they're on the flame pit, Killalot will go and get them, always.
What's happened here is that 15 seconds earlier, his claw broke, and there's nothing left he can do. He's impotent at this point. And if you notice, straight afterwards, he then drives out the way, and Shunt comes into that CPZ instead.
Yeah, Killalot just runs away. So his claw broke. When did it break? I didn't spot that.
I think it was as part of Coyote shoving Hobgoblin into him at that point. What I would imagine is that the weapon has kind of uppercut the bottom claw.
Yeah, it's been
and pulled it off its mounting.
Opened too much or something. Yeah, okay.
So his Killalot claw has kind of turned into a Mr. Psycho style claw, just pointing downwards.
Not really doing anything. Well, yeah, that'd be why Killalot runs away then. But that did make me laugh just after all that talk from Jonathan Pierce about Killalot can't come out and get him. And then I think this is just as whoever it is goes into the, actually crosses that line into the corner patrol zone. And just at that moment, Killalot turns and runs away.
Oh, Jonathan. Of course, the other thing we have, in this fight that I didn't think was worth talking about, is Coyote going after Shunt when cease has been called, which is, I believe, technically rather naughty and something that you're not really allowed to do. Because as a safety thing, once cease is called, you're meant to either stop or drive over to a place where you can get your link out safely. You're not really meant to keep on having fun. So I wonder if either A, that was just a bit of editing to put the cease in first, or B, they might have had a little bit of a talking to over that. Because I believe Apollo got spoken to about that at some point.
Yeah. It's fine when Apollo did it, though. It's fine, Coyote did it. But yeah, there does need to be a when we tell you to stop, you need to stop rule, really, doesn't there? Then that does need to be there. I wonder if maybe they should have like a cease that marks the end of the fight, and then a different thing for now everyone stop. But
I think there's that kind of intrinsic situational awareness from people of when it is and is not appropriate to have a bit of fun. So if Caesar's been called because one of the main panels on the outside of the arena has come off, meaning that the audience are completely exposed to the fight, you probably don't go have a nibble at Shunt. Whereas
not.
if Caesar's been called because your opponent moved 5 feet and broke, maybe you're thinking that the fight needs a little more entertainment value, and you go for it.
Yeah.
Next up, the thrilling battle between Push to Exit and Expulsion. 2 barely functional robots nudge each other until they get stuck and die mutually.
I think possibly the only interesting thing in this is how creepy Jonathan Pierce was about Matilda's rear end at the beginning of this. I don't know what we want to say about this other than it's creepy. And I would like to say, please stop doing that.
Jonathan, it's a family show, okay?
like,
some parents somewhere has had to explain that joke and they weren't happy about it.
I think that was the line, I think, for me about his comments about Matilda.
It's the kind of tongue-in-cheek humour I expect from Jonathan Pierce.
Yeah. It's just weird.
This fight, however, is bordering on a waste of electricity. Somewhere in some power station, coal was burned to make that happen.
Yeah. Well, they might have charged it on a solar panel or something. But yeah,
No.
it's
I don't know, this mental image of Shane Swan sort of pedalling a Black Mirror-style exercise bike. Just charging up the batteries for the 2 hours between fights.
It's like your idea for the what was that, the rubbish robot fight? What was that called again?
Oh, the Hebicon robot that I want to build.
Your idea for a Hebicon thing, but scaled up to heavyweight.
Yes, that needs to happen. I feel really bad for Shane Swan because he has made some very good robots in the past. And it's really unfortunate that his best performance in the reboot was with a robot that he didn't build.
Which one was that? Was that
Danton Kia.
Danton Kia? Yeah, I thought it was, yeah. I thought
Which
it was.
he drove extremely well.
Yeah.
And did as much with as he could have, But it's a shame that, Push to Exit, front hinges are kind of his thing. You'd really love to see it work out for him. But once again, I think he's going to have the hobgoblin problem of you've had 2 chances and you've not taken them. I think it's going to be hard for him to get it on a 3rd time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But someone, even if it's not Shane Swan, someone please make a good front hinge flipper. Because they're great to watch and any variety is good.
Bring back, what was it, Storm 2?
Are you thinking of Firestorm?
Firestorm, I'm sorry.
I mean, Storm 2 does have a front hinged lifter. They never use it because it's a weapon and Storm 2 don't do weapons.
As I said it, I knew it was wrong, but yeah, Firestorm. Bring back that robot. Nostalgia, all the things.
Who else are you waiting to come back then?
Who else would I like to see again?
I mean, the return of Iron Ore didn't do anything for you.
Iron Ore didn't do anything, no. But then, I didn't really remember Iron Ore. If Panic Attack came back, I remember that. Pussycat would be funny. All the old classics,
Panic
Razor.
Attack would be quite a good one, actually. You could argue that Expulsion was an attempt at a modern day Pussycat.
Yeah, that's true. That was sort of the similar idea, really, wasn't it?
So it turns out you didn't want that. Turns out no one wanted that.
I don't know. What I'm saying is just like nostalgia, all the things. Like a robot that's like Pussycat is not the same as actually having Pussycat back, And it would be purely nostalgia if they came back and I enjoyed it. It wouldn't.
On to the semi-finals where the good robots come back.
Okay. The good robots, in quotes. Yes, come on.
I was talking about the 2 that are coming back. The Thor Coyote rematch, what can we say about this that we hadn't said in the first one?
It's bashy and pushability at the end of this. This is Thor. It should have been Thor's easy win, but then that Rogue House robot actually did something.
Yes.
Because Matilda came out with her flywheel and delivered a big impact to Thor, which, as we discussed earlier, Thor does not like, and it vented all its CO2.
I've been saying this for a while with Matilda. Every other house robot can control the damage that it does in a given situation. So Dead Metal can grab a hold of something And if it realises that the sword's going to come down on something too fragile, it could always back out. Shunt can kind of hit with the axe, but that doesn't do a great deal anyway, necessarily. Killalot can pick something up and choose whether to pinch harder. But with a flywheel, there's no finesse. There is the choice of going with the tusks or going with the butt, but that's about it. And that's why I love Matilda so much. We're talking actual damage. Actual fight-changing damage. Which, with a Rogue House robot, is the point. If it's just coming into the CPZ, maybe there's a better argument for, just give him a bit of a flip or something for show, but with Rogue House robot, it should be something to be worried about.
Has Matilda ever used the flywheel when a robot's going into the CPZ, or has it only ever used the flywheel in other situations?
Once in this episode with Expulsion. Also, I'm thinking of just notable times. Heat A against Behemoth as well. They had a big chunk taken out of their side by Matilda by getting too close to the CPZ. Not even in it, as far as I recall.
Fair enough.
Plus then, if we're going to look at pre-reboot, Series 6, Series 7 especially, Matilda would just smash anything without a second thought.
Fair enough.
Of course, it did go to a judge's decision. Is it me, or did that conversation where the judges were deliberating feel heavily staged?
I haven't rewatched it, so I can't remember, I'm afraid.
Fair enough. It's basically Lucy Rogers making a very clear and coherent point, and then Sethi Vijayakumar making another very clear and coherent point, and that's kind of it. It's not really how conversations work.
But then this is, these are three very intelligent people. You'd think that they could, far better than I can, express an idea clearly and concisely. I also think they've got the advantage in this case of this was an obvious decision. I don't think there really was a decision. So, what more is there to say other than what was said? There
are things you can credit Coyote for, but that doesn't make them winners of the fight, I suppose.
No.
Expulsion Magnetar was even more clear-cut. Now, to be fair, even Series 8 Pulsar would win this fight. Mm-hmm. Even while smoking, it would win this fight. Because give Expulsion 20 seconds and they're going to drive into enough trouble to get killed anyway.
Now, conspiracy theory time. In this fight, there's a fog of war. Did Ellis sneakily burn out a motor during fog of war, and we didn't see it?
Was it a fog of war at all, or did they edit that in?
Was that just Ellis smoking everywhere?
My favourite thing about this fog of war? Expulsion has taken the time to spin up and then run weapon first into the pit release.
Yeah, and then that stopped their weapon dead as well.
Yeah. The tyre doesn't bat an eyelid.
No. No, that definitely shows that it's not the world's strongest weapon.
I suppose this has kind of proven the point about fog of war potentially having a positive impact on a fight in that it gave Magnetar time to spin up.
Yeah. Not that it needed it, but yes.
Well, no, not at all. The issue is that then allows Jonathan Pierce to say something extremely annoying, which is that when Magnetar's up to full speed, he talks about it having a death drum.
Yes, I know, I spotted that.
I mean, he's not wrong. It has a drum, which has been known to cause death. But it's not what you're going for, is it, Jonathan?
I wonder if he knows. Is he self-aware and he just does these things to annoy us?
He must do, because he gets so close to the right word every time. Armament instead of armour. Death drum, death hum. Crushability and I don't know what.
And pushability. Yeah. So close and yet so far. It was a repeated thing as well. It wasn't just death drum once. Every time he talks about a death hum, it was always death drum.
Does he use it when it's something like a bar or a disc? Not for the record that what Pulsar has is a drum. It's not a drum. And this is going to be count number 1 of times I've said Pulsar instead of Magnetar. There's every chance I've done it before as well.
Yeah.
But in both cases, still not a drum.
Not a drum. I think you've covered the fact that Ellis does not use drums on any of his robots several times already.
And yet I feel like the world hasn't changed yet, so people must not be listening. I will only stop when every reference to this robot having a drum has been removed from the internet. By force if necessary. I will go all North Korea on this if I have to.
That seems a bit extreme.
I will shut down the internet to make this a reality. I'm gonna march up to Big Ben. I'm gonna speak to the elders of the internet, and they're gonna turn it off for me.
Go find the little black box and it's all in. Find the off switch.
References. The playoff. Another thrilling battle.
This is yeah.
So far, I've been praising Coyote for being a reliable robot. And it had to choose this fight to just spontaneously stop working.
It just died, man. It just died. Why? What happened?
It didn't even die, though. The wheels were still going round. It seemed to be grounded or something.
It just, it sort of just stopped. Beached itself a bit.
I got no idea what happened, but yeah. And then Expulsion, having won, goes and celebrates by being punted by Matilda.
Well, because I feel like Coyote and Expulsion kind of stop at the same time, and then Matilda very generously kind of flips Expulsion back onto their...
No.
No?
Coyote stops. Expulsion then goes off into the CPZ for reasons known only to Expulsion. So there is a clear distinction between those two events, I'd say.
Okay,
it isn't contentious that they've been given this win or anything. The push to exit fight, I would almost argue, could potentially have gone to judges. Just because push to exit are the last ones to show movement, but I think they're not showing enough movement. But on this one, it's fairly clear cut. Certainly from what we get to see.
Fair enough.
I was quite struck by the moment in the pits afterwards, with one of their teachers getting rather excited by the whole thing. I was wondering how you felt about that, or if you felt anything about it.
I thought that was quite nice, because there was like the teacher, she was sort of all very excited, and then someone else who I think was another teacher or a teaching assistant or something sort of was saying he was very proud of them and stuff. I thought it was quite nice. I was fine with it.
It's just, I've seen some people kind of taking the view of, well, what's she so excited for? She didn't do anything. And I was wondering if you might join that camp.
Well, those people that think that clearly have no capacity for empathy. I thought it was really nice to see that other people were excited for them, and of course you would be like if you taught children or if you had children and they did something, then you would be excited for them. That just makes sense, and I think it's nice that it was included in the show.
It's good fluff.
Yeah, that's good fluff.
I think it's really interesting as well because she seems more excited than the team do. And that's something I really relate to from having sort of taken kids to sports competitions and things. Because you've got no control over what happens. You've done your bit and you've just kind of got to let it happen. So when it does happen, that's a huge release of energy for you.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not pleased to see that robot in the 10-way, but I don't at all begrudge the team a place in it.
No, I mean, they got through. I mean, I think if they were in pretty much any other heat, they probably wouldn't have done, but, this was the heat they were in, and they got through. It's the way it goes.
And it means we've got 2 school teams. 2 out of 2 school teams in the 10-way.
Shenanigans, conspiracies.
Don't go there. It was too much last time. No, I mean, both of those teams have kind of been... What's the opposite of a victim? No, they're not perpetrators of circumstance. They've been beneficiaries of circumstance to an extent, in terms of the robots they've come up against and the state they've been in or whatever, but that could have been any team that had that little ride. It's a shame that they're definitely going to get smashed to pieces in that fight, but what I'm hoping is it's another chance to see Expulsion self-right.
I hope we do see it self-right. Failing that, I feel like both those robots will just hopefully just sort of quietly stop moving in a corner somewhere, and then the other teams will leave them alone and they won't be destroyed.
I think it should be agreed that they get to just fight each other. And I will say, I think if that happened, Traction would win.
Do you think so?
Well, Traction hasn't stopped working at any point yet, has it?
That's true. Yeah, I think I have to agree.
It has the ability to push things, which is about all you need against Expulsion. So
yeah, the statistics are not on Expulsion's side, unfortunately. Well,
We get to talk about a good fight now.
the final.
Can I start on a moany note?
That's so unlike you.
Jason has come up with an entanglement device. Jason is very proud of his entanglement device. Jason is very keen to share the details of his entanglement device with the cameras. Jason boasts that the cables he's using have a breaking strain of 7 tons. That's tensile strength. He's going to be coming up against a sheer force. It's completely useless.
I know.
What you just said means literally nothing.
Wasn't lost on me as well. And further to that, Ellis has added little things to Magnetar that deflect his entanglement device out of the teeth of his drum. So
Which are clearly something he pre-planned and brought with him as well.
Yeah.
That isn't the kind of thing you make on the bench between fights.
That's not bodged together. No, he thought ahead. Wisely so.
Thor had its chance in this battle.
It did. This was a really good fight because it did go back and forwards a bit. There were times it was, oh yeah, Thor's going to win. They've got the upper hand, and then it switched around a little bit. So it was a good close fight the whole time really, until it wasn't anymore.
Oh yeah. When they had them against the wall, you feel like that should have been it. But it did seem to me that the hammer wasn't hitting as hard as it could. I'm wondering if there were some leftover issues with the pneumatics.
I don't know. So in the slow-mo of one of the only good thing about all the infinite repeats of this moment is that you've got the sort of like slow-mo shot of the hammer coming over, and it looks like the momentum from the hammer starts to die before it gets to Magnetar. It looks like it's sort of bottomed out before that point, and then it's slowing down as it hits Magnetar. It's sort of you're right. It's not. Doesn't look like it's getting the big hits.
But it isn't reaching the stop. That's the thing. It isn't like it's reaching that stop and therefore not hitting. There is a sort of. It isn't necessarily a deceleration, but it's certainly a lack of acceleration at the end of that stroke, isn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely, it's like it's hitting a stop that's like internal or something. Like, yeah, it's as if something's maybe out of alignment. I don't know if maybe like I don't know how the pneumatics for it work, but if the teeth need to be linked in a certain position for the hammer to get through its whole range of movement, and they're misaligned in some way so that it gets to the end of one. I'm assuming they're not. Like, it gets to the end of the rack part of the rack and pinion before the axe is bottomed out, then it's sort of like that's it. Maybe that was what was going on. I don't know, but yeah, it did feel like it wasn't working properly. I don't think, which was a shame.
Of course, if they got a lucky hit on that weapon belt, it's a different story no matter what, even a bit low on power.
Yeah.
But for some reason, Jason seems to have almost let Magnetar go at that point.
Yeah, because Magnetar doesn't have the drive power to back out from that. When it's pinned against the wall, it's kind of stuck there. And then, yeah, I don't know if it's Jason lets him go, and then Magnetar so quickly just spins on the spot, and it's like, there we go, it's free. And then that's kind of the tables have turned moment, really, for that fight.
Of course, it could be the case that he's had him there for his 10 seconds and has to let him go, come to think of it.
Yeah. Who knows with the edit what happened.
And then, of course, we get to see the power of this drum properly. I mean, we've already kind of seen it in the push to exit fight, but that hit where it gets Thor to do a full back somersault.
Yeah.
That's some power.
Yeah, I think this is when we first sort of see the full power of this fully operational weapon. But it was cool. I enjoyed seeing that.
How do you think Magnetar's going to get on in the final?
I don't know. Who else is in the final? Let me have a look. Let me remind myself.
Behemoth, Carbide.
I know.
Rapid,
you know all of it off the top of your head, but I don't.
It's literally 4 robots to remember, Sam. We talk about them every week.
I'm Ryan. I watch far too much Robot Wars.
I'm Sam. I think there's such thing as too much Robot Wars.
I think Magnetar will do... I mean, they're all such good robots, actually. I think, well...
It's an incredibly diverse lineup.
Yeah, they're all... yeah. I don't know. So I think Magnetar should do quite well. I don't know how it will... Rapid, I think, is the one that's the biggest wild card for me, actually, because they Rapid demonstrated in their heat that they are incredibly good at getting underneath other robots. They've got that hardened steel front thing that they replace after every fight, so they're always scraping the ground on the front and stuff. So, and they're also quite well driven. So, I feel like, maybe Magnetar won't be able to get underneath Rapid. I don't know.
If any robot's going to get underneath Rapid, it's probably Magnetar. Because that is something that has been built to very fine tolerances. It's a very precise build.
Yeah, but both Magnetar and Rapid, they're both similar styles of work, really. I think, Magnetar's the only one that stands a chance of doing it, I think, but we will have to see. I don't know what it will be like. If it fights Carbide, I think Carbide would win.
One thing you can guarantee if that fight happens is there's going to be at least one big impact.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be
It's
huge.
not a fight that's going to last long.
No.
I think the issue Magnetar would have there is twofold. One, the wheels would be quite easy to hit. Two, a hit on the side of that drum is going to hurt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there's nothing really to deflect that blow, although there's every chance he's planned for that.
Yeah. Smart guy.
Some might say a genius.
One of us had to say it. I'm sorry, Ellis.
The other thing I'm really left thinking at the end of this episode is, would Thor be more effective if Jason had a teammate there?
You do have to, I was thinking this as well, you do have to wonder how much of a disadvantage he is at because it's just him.
He's the only one.
Yeah.
No other team is a single person.
Because even though Magnetar is built ostensibly entirely by Ellis, and I believe that it is, he's still got his other teammates there to sort of tell him be his eyes looking around the arena and spotting other things. You have to think that if Jason had a teammate, he wouldn't have been hit by Matilda.
Exactly my thought.
Because he didn't see Matilda coming because he was focused on one thing, whereas a teammate would have seen that hopefully and said watch out, move. I do think it is a disadvantage to just be on your own.
For as much of a disadvantage as it might be in the build process or doing repairs, I think it is in the heat of battle that it's most important.
Yeah, I think everything else is fine. I can completely understand, you want to build and maintain a robot on your own. Absolutely fine. Many reasons why that would be the case. And I don't think that's a major disadvantage, to be honest. I mean, the only, as with anything, things like time and funding are going to be impacted if you've only got one person, but it is what it is. But yeah, in the moment of the fight, then I think that is the biggest disadvantage if there's only one of you, which is a shame.
Righto, should we do some ratings then?
Ooh, it's a file-based ratings.
Ooh, yeah. Like all the best. Is it even really a rating system if there's no file involved?
I mean, last time there was no file involved.
Oh, yes, because last time I didn't do any planning. I don't know what it was last time that meant I didn't have much time to get stuff prepared. This time I have the football excuse again. I was at the club for a few hours last night doing interviews, which all went terribly, including one player knocking the tripod over as he tried to walk away and nearly smashing my brand new phone.
Oh, God, that's not good.
Right. You have received a file within which are 4 iconic Robot Wars haircuts in honour of Ellis. I would like you to rate this episode by comparing it to a Robot Wars haircut.
Oh, man.
It's tough, isn't it, this one? They're all good.
That is a tough one. They're all pretty spectacular hairstyles.
As always, you may be able to think of more as well. While you deliberate for a second, a quick point of order. I'm very well aware that this section of the podcast is entirely visual and that may seem confusing. If you go onto the show notes, this is there. You don't have to do this blind. You can go see this image. It's all good. And I think you should. Because number 3 is a doozy.
So I guess I will paint a word picture. I should paint a word picture while I'm thinking. We have a picture of Tim Rackley, who has a mohawk. We have a picture of Simon Scott, who has a mullet. This is from the old Robot Wars.
That looks like Series 3 Razor, I think. It hasn't got the wings on it.
Yeah, so back when mullets were slightly less objectionable. John Reed, an old picture. Well, I think it's an old picture of him with a slightly mad engineer haircut, and then Jason Marston wearing what looks like a very long wig for Thor. I'm going to go with Tim Rackley because of all the haircuts, his is the best, and this was a good episode.
What I was going to go for was Simon Scott because some of it's very long and some of it's very short, and it's not a good combination.
Very good. Very good.
With that out of the way, I suppose we can finally take a look at this 10-way properly.
Yeah.
Because beforehand, as in before we knew any of the entrants in it, I made some very bold claims about what robots I thought it would suit, and none of them are there. So I'm going to have to go against everything I said before in order to make a prediction. Would you like me to run through who's in it?
Yes, because I can't remember. Oh, I found a list. It's fine. We're safe.
Okay, do you want to do it then? Because I was going to try and do it from memory just to impress you, but you can do it well.
Apollo, Big Nipper, Concussion.
Ooh, alphabetical.
Eruption, Expulsion, Iron Ore 6, Sabretooth, Terahertz, Thor, and Traction.
Now, here's the thing. There is not a single horizontal spinner in there,
No, there isn't.
which significantly reduces the potential chaos. Because if you're going to have robots flying around, they're going to be flying upwards, not sideways. Because you've got the flippers in there and you've got the two drums in there.
Yeah.
Who do you really see having a chance?
So just I think the lack of horizontal spinners is probably a good thing. Actually, I think this has got the makings of a fight that will actually last for some time. You know, which I think is good. As long as it doesn't get bashy at the end, I think as long as we get like a solid 3 or 4 minutes of like actual fighting, I think that would be really, really exciting to see. Who do I think will do well? I don't know. I think this is... I want to say like Eruption and Apollo should do well, but then they've got the problem because they're these high-pressure pneumatic systems, and if this is a long fight, I'd imagine... I don't know how many robots they could conceivably toss out of the arena in before they run out of gas.
I mean, the good news for them is that even without gas, they're still good wedges. Which is what Iron Ore 6 is probably going to be from the very outset. And it is great how when talking about flippers, you didn't mention them. That's entirely fair in this case.
Yep. So I think it's safe to say that Traction and Expulsion are probably not going to do well, unfortunately.
I mean, could they make the most of the chaos and just stay out of trouble? No one's going to gang up on them.
I mean, yeah, they could sit in the corner and remain mobile, and then hopefully pick off whoever's left, but then, whoever's left might be quite strong.
I mean, that likely won't be enough to win them it, but it could get them, top 3 or 4.
I think I'm probably leaning towards one of the drums. I think Big Nipper could do well, actually. I was very impressed with what Big Nipper did, and it's a really tough robot. So I think they could do quite well, I think.
Do we want to... It would be a minor spoiler, but we could discuss what weapon they're using. It is in the preview. But I'm not sure I want to go into it just in case people... You know what? We won't go into that because people won't have looked that close. So, yeah, we won't go there. But, suffice to say, Big Nipper is 2 robots.
Yeah.
And it all depends on what they go with.
So
they
on
could
the condition...
decide to go for, we have a very potent weapon, or they could go for, we have a weapon that isn't going to use all of our battery power inside 3 minutes.
That's true, yeah. I guess
and
on
I
the
think
condition...
that's a really tough decision to have to make.
Yeah, that's a good point about the longevity of the battery, actually. Yeah, having that drum will significantly reduce how long they can work for. What about the disc on Concussion? What do you think? Do you reckon they'll be all right?
I don't really see either of the drums coming through this. They're both very good robots, but they're robots that people will target quickly.
Yeah, I think they will get ganged up. I think all the high damage stuff get ganged up on, and I think probably even the flippers might get ganged up on a bit as well. I think it's going to be...
At this point, you've basically just said that every robot is going to get ganged up on.
But so I think it will be... I think we'll end up with is the people with drums will go for the people with flippers and vice versa, and then I think we will end up with Expulsion and possibly Terahertz and Thor and Traction just sort of doing their own thing somewhere else. Maybe Terahertz and Thor will just go and attack whoever they feel like and just sort of try and cause mayhem. I don't know, but I think it's really tough to call, actually, looking at all these, trying to decide who I think's gonna win.
every robot has something going against it. So traction and expulsion are just objectively the weaker robots. That's not a contentious thing to say at this point. The flippers have all potentially got issues with gas. I think of the three, Eruption will fare the best because I think they can conserve gas best. I think they manage their gas best. And of course, you have the advantage of an exceptional driver there as well.
Terahertz and Thor will have the same problem with gas as well.
Yes. And out of the two of them, I would back Thor because I think Thor has got more going for it when the axe doesn't work. Terahertz is very well armoured against things like horizontal spinners in a one-on-one setting. But we saw last time round how vulnerable they were to drums, especially if anything gets round the back. And with 9 other robots, someone's getting round the back.
Yeah, I think that is going to be a big problem for them, unfortunately.
I'd love to see Terahertz in the final. I'd love to see an axe in the final because it's another different weapon type getting through. But I don't quite see it happening. Thor, though, could do really well. Thor could be a real menace in there as much as anything. The drums are going to be fine while they're the right way up, but they won't stay the right way up for long. And once a robot with a drum is inverted, it's not doing very much. I don't know if they're both powerful enough to gyro over, so that, they might be able to sort that for themselves, in which case that's a big plus for them. But ultimately, the more I look at it, the harder it is to look past Eruption. And as I say, before this happened, I would not have backed a Flipper to get it. But because there's no robot in there that's really suited to the situation, I think they have the least disadvantage and the most going for them.
Yeah, I think I'm going to lean towards either one of the big flippers, Eruption or Apollo. I think, but yeah,
or technically Iron Ore 6.
Or technically Iron Ore 6, but that's not going to happen. And again, I think big, depending on the weapon that Big Nipper use, I think they could do well because it is a really tough little robot actually. So, yeah.
True, yeah, it can take some hits.
Yeah, that's the other thing.
What it can't take is entanglement near its wheels.
Will anyone use entanglement, do you reckon?
Ooh, that's a great question.
Because Iron Ore had it, and they ruined a bunch of fights by having it because they spewed crap all over the arena. I wonder if they're going to do the same thing again.
We could very easily see robots getting stranded on that as well. I hope they don't have that. I don't think Jason would bother with his entanglement because you don't see that getting in the way of Concussion or Sabretooth.
No, I think it worked. I think it was probably best suited to a weapon like the weapon on Magnetar because I think that's the most likely to sort of grab it and then have it actually wrap up.
I'd say it's most suited to a bar, really.
Whereas, or a bar, but like a wide drum, I think, is unlikely to sort of catch that in such a way that it gets sucked into the weapon. Tough to call. I think I kind of agree with you. Big Flipper, likely Eruption, maybe a drum as well. Who knows? I think I want the hammer to win. I want Terahertz or Thor, but
just imagine that 6 entirely different weapons in that grand final.
It's going to be good, I think.
Oh, yes. I mean, if Michael Oates says it's going to be good in a preview, then you know it's going to be good, In Michael we trust. But the best thing is, I don't think it's even going to be the best part of that episode because there are so many great matchups that could happen in this final. Carbide versus Rapid would be a great fight. Nuts versus Magnetar would be a great fight as well, actually. I'd love to see that.
Because Nuts is the drive belt on Magnetar exposed enough for Nuts to hit it, do you think?
Nuts hits sideways, not down, that's the thing. We may have had this conversation already, but Nuts is absolutely a potential carbide killer. Smack that chain and it's over. And bear in mind, we're going to have 2 3-way melees with these as well. There's going to be great matchups in there. It's such a massive game of rock, paper, scissors.
It's going to be a really good episode, I hope. It's got the potential to be a really good episode.
The one thing I will say right now, cards on the table, Carbide is not winning this series.
You don't think so?
I just don't. It feels wrong. There's
Why
no
does it
real
feel
logic
wrong?
to it. Well, there is a logic to it. I think there are 3 out of the 4 robots it's going to be up against that could really cause it trouble. Rapid could easily put it out. Nuts could easily take the chain. And Magnetar can seriously uppercut it and just put it into orbit.
I think of the three, interestingly, I actually think Magnetar's the least likely to be a problem
I
for
agree
it.
with that. I absolutely agree with that.
Actually, thinking about like carbide versus nuts, I think carbide can spin up really fast and move quite quickly. I wonder if nuts can even get its flails up to speed before carbide is on it.
I reckon nuts gets up to speed as quickly, if not more quickly.
Because that'd be I don't know the timings exactly. So like, I think that'd be interesting. I think once nuts is up to speed, I think carbide's got problems. So yeah, it's a question of can carbide get there quickly enough.
Also, the kind of fortuitous hit you're looking at being a potential match winner in that doesn't necessarily rely on them being at full speed.
Yeah, that's true. Oh,
No.
It'll be good. It'll be good.
This final, the only thing that could disappoint me in this final is if Carbide wins it.
You think so? I still think Carbide are going to get it. I think of all the robots, I think Rapid is the most likely to beat Carbide. I think seeding in predictions like in order. I think Carbide, failing that Rapid, failing that Magnetar. I think.
I don't see Rapid winning it, but I see them really affecting the outcome.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Although if they do win it, oh, I can't wait to see that reaction.
I think the Reddit will be a cesspool, and I will just unsubscribe for a short while.
It'll be a no-go zone for a few hours at least. That's right, as well.
Dear.
We're recording this Thursday night, so we don't have too long to wait.
No, we don't.
But it still feels like a very long time.
Although you guys have a week to wait for hear our thoughts on it, though.
Yeah, because that's what everyone's holding on for.
Yeah.
All those listeners out there, they're not even going to watch the final until they listen to us.
I really hope no one holds off waiting for Spinnerproof before they watch. That would be poor life decisions. You can find the show notes for this episode at spinnerproof.com/episodes/17. And there you can find links to all the things we've been talking about. You can also find a link to our Twitter at Spinnerproof, where you can tweet us your predictions for who you think is going to win this tournament.
Also, I'd like to add to the usual outro, if you have been enjoying this, it would be incredibly helpful to us if you could leave a review in whatever place you get your podcasts. It is one of those things that does genuinely help people find this. And we'd like more people to find this. I want to talk about podcasts because I've had a very significant life change recently where I've obtained a working phone with a working headphone jack. And that means that I have been on a massive podcast binge the last couple of weeks. And I'll tell you what, maybe this has been noticeable, but I've kind of been in a bit of a podcasting funk where I haven't necessarily been putting as much time into this as I used to. And through a combination of having to take a week off and listening to so much stuff, I am so recharged right now for podcasting. It's unbelievable. I've been getting hold of you with ideas of things I want to do for the podcast that are probably terrible and probably completely off topic, but it's been a long time since I've been thinking of doing anything other than what we already do.
I mean, I think we can begin to sow the seeds that Spinnerproof may branch out a little bit from just combat robots in the future if we want this to carry on.
It's one of those things where it's about things that are peripherally related. So something that I really want to talk about more that we've spoken about in the past is Lego, because a large part of my childhood love affair with Robot Wars was expressed through Lego. And I think there are so many other things around this topic that are so incredibly interesting that we've potentially got, you know, I don't know what, I was about to try and use a measurement system that doesn't really make sense, but, you know, we've got plenty to talk about between series, is what I'm saying.
We've got many yards left in talking about things.
There's distance to run if we want it, you know? But yeah, I basically, now that I have a podcast player, I want to talk about the things I've been listening to. So,
yeah, what have you been listening to then? Please do enlighten us.
That will require reaching my phone, and I've forgotten where I've put it. Oh, it's in my pocket. That's unorthodox.
Who puts their phone in their pocket? Which pocket do you put your phone in?
Right side.
Have you got the screen facing your leg or facing out?
Generally facing my leg, because that's the way the hand naturally goes in the pocket.
Yeah, interesting. Same as me, but some people do like weird things, like the screen facing out in their back pocket or something. It's bizarre.
People do lots of things that are wrong. You just have to accept it in the world, you know? Some people hang their loo roll the wrong way.
Which
the
way's
first
the wrong
podcast
way?
I want to talk... Oh, okay. You know what the wrong way is.
Well, okay. I'm sorry. Carry on. The first podcast you want to talk
No,
about.
we're going through this now.
Oh,
Toilet
man.
paper should be away from the wall.
As is in the pattern diagram, yes.
Exactly. It's on the packet. It's not difficult. If that offends you, then get over it. Anyway, the first one I would like to talk about, just because I've just got an alert saying there's a new episode available, and I think anyone that listens to this podcast has worked out that we do, is Hello Internet. Anybody who has not listened to that, if you like the things we're talking about, you're gonna like that.
I think even if you don't like the things that we talk about, you'd probably like Hello Internet. It is a very, very funny show.
Hello Internet to me is the podcast. That is the thing that has shaped my idea of what a podcast is.
Interesting, yeah.
It was the first podcast that I really sort of picked up properly and started listening to.
I was going to say, like, because I feel like the first podcast that someone listens to probably has a big influence over what they expect to hear. I think it's probably fairly clear from the way that Spinnerproof is edited that I listen to a lot of highly edited podcasts in general. Because I think because there are other podcasts that are a bit more casual where it's just like they have this conversation like we're having and then just kind of just upload that. And I think if that's your first experience of podcasting, maybe these more edited ones sound a bit weird. So yeah, I think the first one you listen to probably has a big influence over what you expect of podcasts.
Yeah. To me, what you've described there, that style of having a conversation and putting it up, that's what radio is.
Yeah.
You know, I've done a radio show, albeit a student radio show that no one ever listened to. And that was 3 people around a table, each with a microphone, talking over each other for 60 minutes.
Yeah.
With music breaking it up so that we could have an argument without anyone hearing. That's basically how that worked. So yeah, another podcast I've been listening to that I never thought I would is the Adam Ruins Everything podcast. I don't know if you're familiar with this.
No, I've not heard of that.
So Adam Ruins Everything, it's a series that started off online, I think, run by College Humour, that has since become a TV show, which is this kind of, we're going to take an idea and criticise it for half an hour, which is probably my least favourite style of thing. Think Cinema Sins, that kind of thing.
Oh,
it's just basically crapping on stuff from height.
Is it that level of criticism as well, of just pointless, not at all in-depth criticism, or is it like actual...
Well, that's kind of the point of the podcast, really. It is researched and it is trying to do it in a responsible way by giving sources and admitting mistakes when they're made and so on. But it's not the kind of thing I'd like to listen to. This podcast, however, is completely different. On each episode, they'll have maybe 2 or 3 minutes with an expert on the subject. This is half an hour to an hour with an expert on that subject. And it's one of those things where if you went through it and just picked out the 2 or 3 episodes that are about stuff that you are interested in, you wouldn't get any mileage out of it. But I've been listening to this and I've learned about things like... I'm just looking through here trying to remember. So I've listened to things about voting rights that I wouldn't otherwise care about. I'm listening to things about marriage that I don't usually care about. I'm listening to things about forensic science. And just learning an absolute buttload of stuff. And that's brilliant because until now, most of my podcast listening has been Robot Wars podcasts.
Yeah.
That's been about as much as I could get through without, listening on the move. So that's been absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, there's a couple of podcasts I listen to that are sort of in a similar kind of thing. So like, there's one I listen to called Do by Friday, which is one which like you, it's one that I find it weird that I like it. It's a very, very hectic show. There's a lot of American politics in it and stuff. But it is interesting. It is very funny, and I think it's much closer to the unedited radio show than anything else that I listen to. So it's sort of funny that I like it. And then the other one that sort of springs to mind that you're describing when you're describing like these, criticism of other things. It's a show that doesn't. It's finished now. It finished a long time ago, but it is one of the first that I listened to. It's called Hypercritical, which was 100 episode run from a couple of people just criticising all manner of things in the world of Apple and technology. I think that the tagline for the show was "Nothing is so perfect that it can't be complained about," and John Siracusa really did complain about a lot of stuff. There's very famous episodes about like games controllers, like gamepads that you'd use for playing games, and also about toaster ovens and stuff like that. So all manner of things that he just goes into ridiculous depth into, and it is very interesting.
It's interesting you mentioned John Siracusa because I followed up your recommendation of Robot or Not.
Yeah.
That is a weird little podcast. It's not often you pick up a podcast where you will find yourself with a 30-second episode. 5 or 6 of which is intro music. Of basically, is this thing a robot? No. Okay.
Yeah, I think the first 100 or so of that sort of live up to the name of Robot or Not, and then they've like I said last time we talked about it, they've parked that idea and they're doing other things. So the episodes, they vary in length a lot. Like I said, there are some that are 30 seconds long, there are some that are 15 minutes, but they're never very long. There
are only so many things that you can be unsure of whether they're a robot or not. It does inspire me to come up with a Sandwich or Not podcast as well, which I think I would be brilliant at.
Oh, God.
Actually, is that already a thing? I reckon that could already be a thing.
What, Sandwich or Not? I mean, Robot or Not, they covered it. They did do a discussion about what makes a sandwich.
Why did I not already know this?
I think I told you about it last time.
Oh, yeah, and I just didn't follow up on it. That's why.
You had the same reaction. I can try and give you an episode number if you want.
I'm sure I'll get there eventually. That also brings up, peripherally related to Hello Internet, have you listened to the Unmade podcast?
I listened to like the first 10 minutes of the first episode and it didn't grab me, I'm afraid. Sorry, Brady.
It's a really good idea.
Episode 102 of Robot or Not is about sandwiches.
I was about to make a note of that and then I realised I'm going to have to listen to this again, so I don't need to. I don't want to bang through too many of these. There are a lot of podcasts that I'm enjoying. The last one that I want to sort of recommend is a podcast called 99% Invisible, which is all about really finicky and really niche elements of design that you don't notice. And the way I got into this, and I wish I had the episode in front of me to remember this term, but they did a collaboration with some YouTube channel, so it's on YouTube, it's not one of their podcasts as such, all about doors that you're meant to push that have a pull handle on them. Which is, I think, one of the most annoying things in 21st century life. And you're laughing because you agree, and I know this.
Yeah, that's a laugh of agreement. That is, yeah, push doors with pull handles, really irritating.
So yeah, if you like finicky stuff about design, which, if you're listening to us complain about stuff, you probably do, that is a fantastic little podcast to pick up. Oh, I've also just realised that I didn't mention the Infinite Monkey Cage, but I feel like people already know about that. Brian Cox, Robin Ince, Science, Radio 4, it's all good.